No two creatures are alike. Some are slenderer, some are bulkier, and some are just giant. In the case of the Scutosaurus, it's probably one of the biggest prehistoric creatures we've ever had on our planet. Just in sheer bulk, it's the creature equivalent of the rock. The Scutosaurus was discovered by experts in the year 1920 in Russia and was named accordingly, with its translated English name being shield lizard. That name is not unearned. The Scutosaurus was a 6-foot-long, 1,000-pound thing with thick bones, bulky muscles, and a lot of armor plating. All that plating meant that this animal was pretty well defended against potential predators, even if it did make the creature significantly slower. But what's most fascinating about the Scutosaurus is that they were basically prehistoric buffalo, roaming the floodplains of Eurasia some 250 million years ago, just as cows and buffalo travel in packs today. The Scutosaurus did back then. The Scutosaurus was an herbivorous creature, but it's definitely a scary one. While humans were obviously not around at the time, this animal would likely behave in the same way an elephant or rhino would if it felt confronted by a human, which is to say, it will crush you. With its webbed front and back feet, flexible knees and ankles, and long neck and tapered body, not to mention its numerous teeth, Nothosaurus was a formidable marine reptile that prospered across the nearly 50 million years of the Triassic period. Because it bears a superficial resemblance to modern seals, paleontologists speculate that Nothosaurus may have spent at least some of its time on land. It's clear that this vertebrate breed dare, as evidenced by the two nostrils on the top end of its snout, and although it was undoubtedly a sleek swimmer, it wasn't as well adapted to a full-time aquatic lifestyle as later plesiosaurs and plesiosaurs like Cryptoclydus and Elasmosaurus. Nothosaurus is the best known of the family of marine reptiles known as Nothosaurs. Another well-attested genus is Lauriosaurus, although it's not widely known to the general public. Nothosaurus is one of the most important marine reptiles in the fossil record. There are over a dozen named species of this deep-sea predator, ranging from the type species, and it apparently had a worldwide distribution during the Triassic period, with fossil specimens discovered as far afield as Western Europe, Northern Africa, and Eastern Asia. There is also speculation that Nothosaurus, or a closely related genus of Nothosaur, was the distant ancestor of the giant plesiosaurs Leopleurodon and Cryptoclydus, which were an order of magnitude bigger and more dangerous. Evolution is truly a friend to those that are forced to endure the suffering of bullying. Take for instance the Astrapsis, which evolved from a helpless target into a much stronger and more resilient creature. Although it took a few thousand years, so that's probably not all that comforting. The Astrapsis was a unique creature in its time, and not only because it looks like Seymour II from Little Shop of Horrors. That once for all those niche musical fans among us. In its day, the Astrapsis survived mostly from the nutrients and algae that were littered amongst the seafloor, which made it, like all non-carnivores, a promising prey. It's probably accurate to estimate that the Astrapsis was eaten by just about every predator alive during the Devonian period. Eventually, the creature had been preyed on so often that it evolved to develop a new tougher head and body armor that would protect it against cunning predators like sharks. Unfortunately, this new armor also made the 25-centimeter-long Astrapsis gained significant weight up to a ton, which did really help protect it against predators. The Astrapsis is one of evolution's miracle stories. A prey creature that was effectively transformed into something stronger. It also looks weird, so there's that. If the unpronounceable name makes it too hard to comprehend, just think of this as a fish with a backbone. While the Cambrian period is probably best known for the sudden influx of unusual non-vertebrate creatures, this creature was one of the first to reverse that trend. The Haecuichthys is one of a handful of fish considered to be almost vertebrates. Creatures that did not have a full backbone, but the faint outline of one along with the Pachia and the Mylocangmingea. There's a lot of debate over whether or not this animal is considered to be a prehistoric fish. But we're just going to go ahead and say that it is. After all, they must adapt or die. We don't have time for scientists to go through the whole experiment. We have videos to produce despite the Haecuichthys existing some 525 million years ago. Its existence wasn't even known until 1999. Hence the ongoing debate about what exactly it is. There just isn't enough detail for it to be considered part of either group. The Haequichtstes is one of the more unique fish-like creatures that existed before the dinosaurs. A fascinating flat shape, being that even now is incredibly confusing to people whose whole business is old animals. We hate to say it, but this is about to become a life-changing moment for you. Things will never go back to normal after you see what we're about to show you. Meet Dickinsonia, the animal kingdom's oldest and possibly strangest known member. Over 600 million years ago, the Dickinsonia was quietly developing far beneath the ocean's surface. With no notable predators, the Dickinsonia was able to evolve without the need for protective skin or even skeletons, leaving them with an unusual, oval-like ribbed squishy body that looks nothing like any other animal alive today. This animal is one of the earliest complex life forms ever to exist on our planet, and it survived almost entirely on the microbes that cover the seafloor. I think I speak for everyone when I say I think I would have mistaken this creature for sponge. Given that humans famously evolved from fish, it's not outside the realm of possibility that the Dickinsonia was one of the many biological steps that led to the eventual creation of our own species. It feels almost terrifying to imagine that this thing may be one of our earliest ancestors. If any of you out there are looking for a new and creative insult for others, then you're in luck. The Gorgonopsia, or Gorgon face, was a kind of animal that one time was referred to as a mammal-like reptile, and it's definitely not a pleasant-looking thing. What made the Gorgonopsia so frightening to look at was everything really, but mostly it came down to the creature's unusual bone structure. With a differentiated tooth-shaped pillar-like legs and ear bones, this was about as close to a mammal as a reptile likely could ever get, and yet this is most definitely still a reptile, or so we assume. Nobody really knows whether this thing had fur, scales, or just pure naked skin. So, calling it a reptile at all feels like a real stretch. The largest known species of Gorgonopsia, you were around the size of a large bear, with 12-centimeter long teeth that were clearly part of the animal's evolution into being a carnivore. Surprisingly, the Gorgonopsia is one of the least famous prehistoric creatures, with only dedicated experts and enthusiasts even having heard of the thing. But what we do know is this: the Gorgonopsia is not an animal that you would have wanted to cross paths with, and not just because of the Gorgon face. Now, 540 million years ago, in an ocean full of oxygen, those primitive bacteria have evolved. A handful must have clung on through the big freeze. There are plants everywhere, and something else. It looks like some kind of armored slug. It's called Wewacksia. It's one of a new generation of complex multi-celled organisms. We're entering one of the most dynamic periods in the Earth's story, the Cambrian explosion. Increased oxygen levels allow creatures to grow larger and develop bony skeletons. There are worms, sponges, and these their trailer bites, distant relatives of insects, lobsters, even scorpions. Life in the oceans is blossoming. From microscopic bacteria to a monster like this. This is an Anomalacarius. It's about 60 centimeters long. Look at its large eyes, its razor-sharp teeth, and grasping limbs. All Anomalacarius has to do is take its pig. The trilobite guard right itself, its soft belly is exposed. Evolution isn't a straight line. It's more a process of trial and error. These days, nature has firmly decided that the best place for legs to go is under the torso. 520 million years ago, it seems that the best placement for legs was still up for debate. Here we see a fossil of fusion weeds from South China with its legs clearly positioned right underneath its mouth. Despite this less than ideal arrangement, this creature was hugely influential from an evolutionary point of view. It's a common ancestor to many different modern-day creatures, including tiny insects, spiders, and even sea creatures like lobsters. The unusually positioned legs aren't the only strange thing about the fusion weeds. It also has a spine that protrudes above and beyond its brain. While its legs weren't used for walking, because that would have been impossible in the fusion weed's seafloor environment, it's likely that it used them to shove food into its mouth as it passed over the top of it. That would make it the first ever creature in known history to use limbs for eating. The goblin shark, also known as the vampire shark, is one of the most interesting things you will find in places like the Mariana Trench. Why? Well, because of its age. Its species is said to have lived for millions of years. They're believed to be so very old that some scientists refer to them as living fossils. While most sharks are considered to be scary in one form or another, most agree that the goblin shark is terrifying. What's more, its scary reputation is earned because of its unique feature on it. That's because the elongated nose of the goblin shark is full of electromagnetic sensors. It can detect even the smallest discharge, such as in a prey's brain. Yet, that's not what makes them terrifying. When it does find food, it'll not only lock onto it, it'll extend its mouth from its body and chomp down on the foe, and this is a feature that's not common with sharks or various other species on Earth. On average, the goblin or vampire shark is said to be around 10 feet long, but because of their rarity and the fact that adults tend to live in deeper waters that humanity can't reach easily, it is possible that the goblin sharks are much bigger than we realize. Nature must have a really sick sense of humor, because when it created this terrifying sea creature, I guess it thought it would be fun to combine the horror of a shark with the danger of your dad's power tools. This prehistoric shark, known as the Helicoprion, dates back to over 270 million years ago, when sea monsters really did rule the oceans. Its appearance is both unique and utterly frightening, to say the least, with its most notable physical feature being the circular toothy saw right in the middle of its mouth, which acted as a natural form of defense that probably also warded off predators to begin with. But what other sea monster would even dream of messing with this thing? It looked more like a buzz-saw death trap than it did an animal. But then again, there are plenty of prehistoric creatures that would better serve as today's nightmare fuel than yesterday's fauna. In 1950, scientists found the remnants of a Helicoprion in a bay in Idaho that gave them some insight into exactly what it may have looked like. The saw whorl was made up of some cartilage, yes, but also a whopping 117 teeth that sat either in its gaping maw or its lower lip and curl under the chin. Either way, whoever ended up as the Helicoprion's meal was pureed before they were eaten. This was one fish you didn't want to mess with. Subscribe for more videos like this and turn on the notification to help the channel out. Thanks for watching.